The Sterling Grand Hotel was less a place of comfort and more a monument to wealth. Its lobby, a vast cavern of polished marble and cold steel, swallowed sound, leaving only the sharp, lonely click of expensive heels echoing against the floor. Giant crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen constellations, casting a brilliant but sterile light that did nothing to warm the space. It was a sunny afternoon in New York City, but the light that streamed through the towering windows seemed to only highlight the dust-free surfaces and the intimidating emptiness between the minimalist furniture. The staff moved with a silent, robotic efficiency, their faces impassive masks of corporate hospitality. They were pieces in a perfectly arranged diorama, designed to be seen but not engaged with. The entire atmosphere was one of calculated exclusivity, a place where human warmth was a liability. Into this cold theatre walked Arthur. He was a man of about 70, and he seemed to carry the warmth the building so desperately lacked. His clothes were simple, worn from years of use but impeccably clean. A small, old-fashioned carry-on bag was held loosely in one hand, and his shoes, though visibly scuffed, had been polished to the best of their ability. He didn't seem intimidated or out of place. Instead, his gaze was curious and kind, taking in the grand surroundings with a serene observational air. Watching him from across the lobby was Ethan, the hotel's general manager. At 38, Ethan was the very embodiment of the Sterling Grand. Tailored Brioni suit, perfectly coiffed hair, and a Patek Philippe watch that was worth more than most people's cars. His posture was rigid, his expression a carefully maintained shield of cold professionalism. Arthur approached the front desk with a gentle smile, his voice soft as he asked for a room. The young receptionist, trained to spot incongruities, hesitated. Her eyes darted from Arthur's worn coat to his scuffed shoes, and a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face before she discreetly summoned her manager. Ethan glided over, his presence immediately commanding the space. He didn't greet Arthur, he simply looked him up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal that dripped with contempt. Then, in a voice loud enough for the few nearby guests and several staff members to hear, he said, "This isn't the place for someone like you." He gestured vaguely toward the door. Perhaps a hostel would be more suitable. He then signaled for security, the gesture a final, public dismissal meant to humiliate and expel the unwelcome presence. As two uniformed guards began to walk toward him, Arthur remained perfectly still. He didn't flinch or show any sign of anger. He simply met Ethan's cold gaze and spoke, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the lobby's tense silence. "Ethan, please call Mr. Thompson's personal number. It's in your emergency contact list. Tell him his father is here." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Ethan's face, once a mask of arrogant control, completely froze. The color drained from his cheeks as shock, then panic, and finally a tidal wave of sickening shame washed over him. The entire world he had built on a foundation of appearance and status crumbled in that single, devastating moment. It's in moments like these, when the truth shatters a carefully constructed lie, that you truly see a person's core. If you feel the power in these stories, subscribing to the channel helps us bring more of them to light. The silence that followed Ethan's panicked call to Mr. Thompson's office was heavier than any sound he had ever heard. The voice on the other end, that of a calm and professional executive assistant, had confirmed his worst nightmare with chilling simplicity. "Yes, Mr. Thompson is my father. He enjoys visiting unannounced. Please extend him every courtesy." The line went dead, but the words echoed in the vast, empty space of Ethan's mind. He stood frozen in his lavish office, the Patek Philippe on his wrist, suddenly feeling like a cheap handcuff. The world he had so meticulously constructed, a fortress of tailored suits and cold authority, had been demolished by a single, quiet sentence from a man in a worn coat. Every condescending word he had spoken now played back in his head, each one a hammer blow against his own fragile ego. Walking back out to the lobby was the longest journey of his life. Each step on the polished marble floor felt like a step toward his own execution. He saw the scene exactly as he had left it, a frozen tableau of his own making. The two security guards stood awkwardly, unsure of their orders. The young receptionist looked pale and terrified. A few guests lingered, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama, and in the center of it all stood Arthur, his expression not of triumph, but of a deep, sorrowful patience. He was simply waiting. As Ethan approached, he could feel every eye in the room on him, not with the fear and deference he commanded, but with the pity and scorn reserved for a fool who had been publicly unmasked. Ethan's mouth was dry, his well-rehearsed apologies turning to ash on his tongue. He was prepared to resign, to offer any groveling plea that might salvage a shred of his career, but Arthur didn't give him the chance. The old man's gaze cut through Ethan's panic, holding not fury, but a profound and heavy disappointment that was somehow far worse. "And you won't be fired, Ethan," Arthur said, his voice quiet but carrying the immense weight of his authority. "But for 1 week you are not the manager. You will work with me. You'll carry my bags, clean my room, and you will learn what it means to serve." The sentence was passed, not in a boardroom, but in the echoing emptiness of the lobby he once ruled. This was not a punishment of termination, but a sentence of education, a far more complex and humiliating fate. To be fired would have been a clean break, a story he could spin into one of corporate politics or professional differences, but to be demoted, to be forced to serve in front of the very people he had lorded over, was a slow, public unraveling of his entire identity. It's moments of unexpected grace like this that really test a person's character. Seeing a story through to its heart is why we do this. And your subscription is what makes it possible for us to continue sharing them. Ethan had no choice but to nod, the single gesture sealing his fate and beginning the most difficult week of his life. The first step of his new existence was to strip off the Brioni suit. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit staff locker room, surrounded by the quiet murmurs of employees who now saw him as a fallen king, he donned the simple, grey uniform of a general staff member. It felt foreign, the coarse fabric a constant, itching reminder of his spectacular fall from grace. When he emerged, he tried to avoid eye contact, but he could feel the stares of his former subordinates, a complex mixture of shock, pity, and for a few, a poorly concealed sense of satisfaction. He was no longer Ethan, the general manager. He was just a man in a uniform, about to learn the true cost of his arrogance. His first official duty was to escort Arthur to the presidential suite, the most exclusive and opulent space in the entire hotel, a sanctuary Ethan himself had rarely entered. He walked beside Arthur, his posture stiff with shame, and picked up the old man's single, small carry-on bag. It was surprisingly light, containing almost nothing of material value, yet it felt heavier than anything he had ever carried in his life. The irony was a suffocating weight in his chest. He, who judged men by the heft of their wallets and the brand of their luggage, was now carrying this simple, scuffed bag for the man who owned everything he had ever aspired to possess. The quiet journey in the elevator was an eternity of silent judgment. The days that followed blurred into a grueling routine of servitude. Arthur was a meticulous but fair guest. He requested his room be cleaned at specific times, his bed made with military precision, and his simple meals served without fanfare or interruption. Ethan, for the first time, learned the sharp sting of bleach on his hands as he scrubbed the vast marble bathroom until it gleamed. He felt the dull ache in his lower back from pushing a heavy vacuum across acres of plush, unforgiving carpeting. He began to see the hotel not as a palace of power and prestige, but as a complex machine run on the unseen sweat and tireless labor of people he had never bothered to know by name. Arthur rarely spoke to him directly during these tasks. He would often sit in an armchair by the large window, reading a book, or simply looking out at the city, his presence a silent, constant form of observation. This was infinitely worse than any verbal reprimand or angry outburst could have been. Ethan felt like a specimen under a microscope, his every clumsy, resentful movement analyzed and recorded. He wasn't just cleaning a room, he was being systematically dismantled, his pride and arrogance being scrubbed away with every stain he removed, leaving behind only the raw, insecure man he had tried so desperately to bury beneath layers of expensive fabric and false confidence. On the fourth day, while polishing silverware in the bustling staff kitchen, he overheard two housekeepers talking in hushed tones. One was worried about her son's mounting medical bills after an accident, while the other spoke of the difficulty of making rent on time. Her voice filled with a weary resilience that Ethan had never witnessed up close. He had always seen his staff as functions, as cogs in the hotel's machinery, not as people with lives as complex and fraught with worry as his own. The realization struck him with an unexpected and unwelcome force, a quiet, creeping shame that had nothing to do with his own demotion and everything to do with his profound blindness. It was a small but significant crack in the armor he had so carefully constructed around his heart. For the first time in a very long time, he felt a flicker of something other than his own burning humiliation or his all-consuming ambition. It was the beginning of empathy, a painful and unfamiliar sensation that felt both foreign and faintly familiar. Like a memory from a life he had long since abandoned, this is often how real change begins, not with a grand, dramatic gesture, but with a quiet, private moment of seeing the world through another's eyes. If you've ever felt a moment like that, you understand the power of these stories. By subscribing, you help us share more of these quiet turning points. That evening, as Ethan was performing the final task of his day, turning down the bed in Arthur's suite, the old man finally spoke about something personal. He gestured to a small, faded photograph he had placed on the nightstand, a picture of a young woman with a kind and radiant smile. "My wife, Eleanor," Arthur said softly, his voice tinged with a gentle nostalgia. She loved this view of the city. She always said it made the skyline look like a blanket of stars someone had laid out just for her. She believed you could find beauty and dignity anywhere if you just took a moment to truly look for it. Ethan paused his work, his hands still holding the corner of the heavy duvet. He looked from the worn photograph to the sprawling galaxy of city lights outside the panoramic window. For a brief, unguarded moment, he wasn't a humiliated manager or a reluctant servant. He was just a man, listening to another man talk about the woman he loved. In that shared silence, he saw not the billionaire owner of the hotel, but a widower filled with a gentle, enduring memory. A fragile, unspoken understanding began to form between them, a tentative bridge being built across the vast, seemingly impassable chasm of their status. It was the final day of Ethan's week-long sentence, an ordeal that had stretched into an eternity. He was polishing the brass fixtures near the main entrance when a family walked in, looking weary from a long journey. The parents herded two small, sleepy children. Their luggage was scuffed and mismatched, and their clothes were practical, not fashionable. They approached the front desk, where the same young receptionist who had first called Ethan for Arthur was now on duty. Her professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second as she took in their appearance. Her posture stiffened, her questions about their reservation carrying a subtle, questioning edge. The very same cold professionalism she had learned from him. From a discreet armchair across the lobby, Arthur watched, his expression unreadable as he prepared to stand. Before Arthur could even shift his weight, Ethan moved. He set his polishing cloth down and walked calmly toward the front desk. He didn't reprimand the young woman or assert any authority. Instead, he came to her side and spoke in a low, gentle voice only she could hear. "It's all right," he said softly. I look at the children. They're exhausted. Let's make this easy for them. Remember, our job isn't just to check people in. It's to make them feel welcome, to make them feel safe. He then turned to the family, and a smile broke across his face. A genuine, warm expression so foreign it felt like a memory from another life. "Welcome to the Sterling Grand," he said, his voice resonating with a sincerity that instantly put the wary parents at ease. "Today we are so happy to have you with us." The father, who had been bracing for a confrontation, visibly relaxed, a wave of relief washing over his tired face. Ethan didn't delegate or supervise. He took over the check-in process himself, speaking kindly to the children, asking them about their trip, and treating the parents with a profound and simple dignity. Once the keys were ready, he came from around the counter. "Please, allow me," he insisted, gathering their heaviest bags before they could protest. He led them toward the elevators, not as a manager or a servant, but simply as one person helping another. Arthur watched from his chair, a slow, quiet smile spreading across his face. He saw not the arrogant executive he had first met, but the man he had hoped was still there, buried beneath layers of fear and ambition. Later that evening, Ethan entered the presidential suite to perform his final duties. Arthur was by the window, a silhouette against the glittering tapestry of the New York skyline. The air was still, not with the tension of the past week, but with a sense of completion. It was Ethan who broke the silence, his voice raw and unsteady. "I need to apologize," he began, turning to face the old man. "And not for what I did to you. I'm sorry for who I became. I spent so many years running from the poor kid I used to be that I started to believe the expensive suit was the real me. I judged people by the same shallow standards I was so afraid they would judge me by. I forgot what it felt like to be on the other side of this desk, to feel small and unseen." Arthur turned from the window, his eyes holding a deep, resonant empathy. He didn't offer a simple pardon, he offered a connection. 50 years ago. "I stood in this lobby for the first time," he said quietly, his voice filled with the texture of memory. "I was a bellhop. My first job was carrying bags for a wealthy guest who never once made eye contact with me. I promised myself that day that if I ever built something of my own, it would be a place where every single person felt seen, from the billionaire in the penthouse to the dishwasher in the kitchen." He looked at Ethan, and the chasm between them collapsed. "And somewhere along the way, Ethan, you forgot that promise. For a little while, so did I." The two men stood in the quiet of the suite, the city lights a silent witness to the profound shift that had occurred. Arthur placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder, a gesture that was both a pardon and a commission. "Your job is still yours, Ethan," he said, his voice steady, "but your mission has changed. I don't want the Sterling Grand to be the most exclusive hotel in New York. I want it to be the most human. I want this to be a place where dignity is our most valuable amenity, offered freely to every person who walks through those doors, whether they carry a designer suitcase or a worn-out bag." Ethan nodded, the weight of the past week lifting to be replaced by a new, lighter sense of purpose. He wasn't just getting his title back. He was being given a chance to redefine it, to build a legacy not of cold prestige, but of genuine, heartfelt hospitality. In the weeks that followed, a quiet revolution began at the Sterling Grand. Ethan, shedding the last vestiges of his former self, launched what he called the Dignity Initiative. It wasn't a corporate memo or a sterile training seminar. It was him, on the floor, every single day. He worked shifts with the housekeeping staff, learning the strain of their work and the names of their children. He stood beside the doorman, understanding the city's rhythm through their eyes. He spent time in the kitchen, listening to the dreams and worries of the chefs and dishwashers. The rigid, silent efficiency of the hotel began to thaw, replaced by a culture of mutual respect and camaraderie. The staff no longer moved like robots in a diorama. They moved like a family, their smiles genuine and their interactions filled with an easy warmth that no amount of money could ever purchase. The change was not only felt inside the hotel, but was soon noticed by the outside world. The Sterling Grand's reputation began to transform. It remained a beacon of luxury, but now it was spoken of with a different kind of reverence. Guests wrote reviews, not just about the thread count of the sheets or the quality of the champagne, but about the profound sense of being cared for, of being seen as a person rather than a room number. Ethan, in his simple but well-kept suit, found a fulfillment that had always eluded him. The respect he now commanded from his team was not born of fear, but of genuine admiration. He had traded the armor of a Patek Philippe for the quiet strength of his own rediscovered humanity, and in doing so, he had found a wealth far greater than he had ever imagined. 2 years later, the lobby of the Sterling Grand was more prosperous than ever, filled with a vibrant yet peaceful energy. Ethan stood near the entrance, his expression open and content. He saw a young woman approach the concierge desk, her folder clutched tightly in her hands, her face a mixture of hope and nervous apprehension as she asked about a job opening. In her, he saw a reflection of his own past, a person on the verge of a journey. Without hesitation, he walked over, not as a powerful manager, but as a mentor. He extended his hand and offered a warm, encouraging smile. "Welcome to the Sterling Grand," he said. "Let's talk about what you can build here." It is in these moments, these simple acts of seeing the potential in others, that the most beautiful stories are written. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Your subscription allows us to continue sharing these powerful reminders of our shared humanity.